Hello, and welcome to another episode of Social Workers Rise. We are on episode 191. What in the world? I can't even believe it's been 191 episodes. It's amazing. This is your host, Catherine Moore. And if you don't know about me, a little bit about me is I am based here in Southern California in the United States. I have my license in clinical social work, have my bachelor's and my master's, both in social work. So if you ask me what degree to go for, I'm a little bit biased, I will be honest. Also, what I do for my day job, in addition to podcasting, is I am a mental health therapist. I specialize in anxiety management for women. Also, I am a speaker, author, and course creator for social workers. So here I am. I just love social work. I geek out when it comes to anything talking about social work on any level, micro, macro, meso. I am here for it. I'll be honest, most of my background is within the micro field. So a lot of the things that I tend to talk about on the podcast are really geared towards clinical social work. I love macro. I have done some macro internships, done some grant writing, but the course of my journey has just led me to be more clinical and to use macro avenues to share that, such as this podcast that you're listening to here. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, which is burnout. And I know before you tune me off, just another burnout thing. No, for real. This is so serious. Okay. Did you know that about 60 to 80% of social workers report experiencing symptoms of burnout sometime during their career? However, I think this statistic is really low because I have never in my life to this day met a social worker who has not experienced some sort of burnout, symptoms of burnout. And we're going to talk about what these symptoms are. So I would venture to guess it's like 99%, but that's just me. There's no statistic about that. But in my own personal conversations, everybody I've had has experienced these symptoms at some point or another. And we're left wondering here, what the heck do we do? How do we get out of this? Where do we go from here? How do we get unstuck from this rut that is obviously causing us harm? So this passion of mine came, of course, from some personal experience, as a lot of our passions do. So I'll kind of backtrack. So I'm always the type of person, I've always has been, to always be looking for the next thing. And we are just bred like this in our culture, right? There's the high school diploma, then there's the college degrees, then there's the master's degree. And then once you get your master's, then there's the clinical license. And so for me, the epitome of my entire career had been getting my clinical license, as it has been for a lot of you, I'm sure, listening to this. So once I got my clinical license, I was so excited because I thought, oh my gosh, now things are going to change. It's going to be better. I'm going to make all this money and it's going to be amazing. And when that didn't happen, I sort of had a little meltdown and I realized we've gotten to the top of the mountain and I'm still not happy. Things have still not changed. And I did not work this hard and get all these degrees to be miserable. So I really contemplated leaving social work because at this time in my career, I was a new mom. I had a baby. She was 2. I love her to death, right? And I just kept on adding to my plate. So it started out, having a full-time job, which was great. I was working in hospice and I loved it. I loved the patients. I loved the company, the organization, my supervisor. It was great. And then I had a baby. And so, of course, I love my family. I loved being a mom. I loved doing all of the things. But it just got to the point where there was too much. There was just too much that I had to do. And even if I had the time to do all these things, which I didn't because it was completely unrealistic to work full time, 40 hours a week, to also do all of these things for my baby, right? So like the naps and the like the dinners and the shopping for the food and the cooking of the food and the keeping the whole house clean. And then also being there for my husband and also being there for myself, the self-care. And so while there may have been time, oh, and sleeping 8 hours a day, that was also my goal because I got to have my sleep. So while there may have been the time some days there just wasn't the energy to do this. And I thought, what the heck is wrong with me? What is going on? It seems like everybody else is just fine except for me. And I'm over here drowning. I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water and I'm just drowning. Things are slowly starting to fall apart. Relationships are suffering. I'm starting to get written up at work for not doing my notes on time, for being short with colleagues, for just having all of these personality changes that are not normal for me. They're not who I am. And the epitome of all this, where it all came out in a flood of tears, is one night. It's just a typical night. I'm trying my best to do all of these things. I'm over here in the kitchen washing the dishes. And I'm thinking about all the things that I need to do before I go to bed, which includes give my daughter a bath, finish cleaning the kitchen because it's a wreck. I need to finish my notes and prepare for the meeting in the morning because I had already been getting in trouble. And I needed to also get 8 hours of sleep. And I'm thinking, okay, there's just literally not enough time to do these things. And my husband interrupts my thinking because he can see it all over and he can see the personality changes better than I can at this point. And he says, hey, why don't you just take tonight off and come over and watch a movie with me? Which is really sweet, right? But in that moment, I kid you not, I started crying, like ugly crying over the dishes because how the heck would I have time to watch a movie when there's all of these things that must get done? And I realized, oh my gosh, Catherine, you are crying over an invitation to a movie. There is something wrong here. This is not normal. This is not who you are. You don't cry over invitations to go have fun. This is not normal. And so I really had to reevaluate what the heck was going on with me. And so if you've ever had these moments where you're just crying often, more often than you would like, if you're feeling overwhelmed on a regular basis, if you are just feeling exhausted, even if you zone out, if you're feeling like, I just don't want to be here, or you realize you hadn't listened to anything that client had just told you, and you don't know what's happening in this conversation, and if you're feeling like you're just struggling to keep up, if you are not doing as well as you normally do in your work, keeping up with your notes, if you are not as friendly, if you're isolating, if you're getting invited out to places and you say, no, I just can't. I just want to stay in bed. I don't have the energy. I just can't today. And this has been your life, and this is not who you are, then I'm glad you're here today, my friend, because I feel you. I have been there. Today, we're going to talk about an overview of burnout, its symptoms, its impact on your life, and some lessons that I've learned coming out of this experience. And also, too, if you want more information, if you want to dive deeper, I'm going to tell you about a workshop that I'm hosting in December. So stay tuned to the end of the episode if you want to learn more about that. So first, let's talk about what the heck is burnout, because I want to be clear that we're talking about the same thing, because there's other, there's other, I don't want to say things, but there's other things that it could also be if you're feeling just kind of out of sorts with yourself, right? Burnout is one of them, but you could also be experiencing compassion fatigue, moral distress, or secondary trauma. And if you're experiencing either one of these things, more than one, it's really important that first you get clear on what the heck is going on. And if this episode doesn't help to bring some clarity, please talk to somebody about it. A colleague, a supervisor, a professor, somebody who would be able to kind of guide you and see, maybe even your therapist, someone who would be able to guide you and see what the heck is going on, because that's going to determine your next steps. So first, as far as burnout goes, I want you to know that burnout is an actual medical syndrome by the World Health Organization that is caused from prolonged and unmanaged stress. And today we're going to be talking about burnout in our careers, professional burnout, but there also is caregiver burnout. And I saw a lot of this when I was working in hospice, when I was working in the hospitals and medical settings, that people would come in and their role as a caregiver was creating burnout as well. Whole separate thing, a lot of the same symptoms, but today we're going to be focusing on professional burnout. So what this looks like accumulation of a lot of unmanaged stress. And this shows up for you. A lot of the times we start to notice the physical symptoms first. So you might get headaches, you might feel sick more often. You may even have GI issues with your tummy. Your period could be out of whack. You could have trouble getting pregnant. Those are a lot of the physical symptoms that we tend to seek out help for, right? But a lot of the emotional symptoms are more subdued, and you really have to be paying attention to them, because in our society, we're not really taught to pay attention much to our emotions. We're taught to kind of just stuff them down and just pretend like they're not there and they're not bothering us. But one is going to be emotional exhaustion, where you are just tired all the time. You're emotionally just spent, right? So what this could look like in work is if one of your clients comes to you, or you get a new referral and they tell you their story, and in your mind you're kind of thinking like, okay, yeah, well, take a number. We've all been there, heard this a million times. So you're kind of just not really there. Your empathy is just kind of down the drain, and it can cause you to be kind of detached from your work. So not being able to invest the emotional energy into your clients that you were when you first started this career, when you were passionate, when you were energetic, when you were, who you are, who you were meant to be, right? I believe that in those days that you are passionate and excited, like that's who you really are. It's just the systems that we're in is not meant to foster that. The systems that we're in will take advantage of you. They will work you until you cannot physically work anymore, until you end up in the hospital. And that's just how some of these systems are created, right? Even if we are in a great company, a great organization, we love our clients, there is still this risk of overworking. And so I'm here to just kind of validate for you that if you are feeling these symptoms, that it's not all you. A lot of times it's the systems that we are in. And so that's part of it, is looking at what is this job? How is this job set up? Is this sustainable for you? Not talking about your coworkers, but we're talking about you right now. Okay. So the other thing that I want to point out too is another symptom is a reduced sense of accomplishment, meaning you feel like you're getting nothing done. So at the end of the day, you're like, oh my gosh, I've been working all day. I'm exhausted. And it feels like I've achieved nothing. Everything on my to-do list is still there. And I have definitely been there too. Okay. So these are some of the symptoms that you're going to experience when you're starting to feel burnt out. We're going to hit pause on this conversation real quick, because the next time that you need continuing education units, I highly recommend the Therapist Development Center. TDC has helped more than 100,000 social workers pass their licensing exams, including myself. I love that TDC CE courses are engaging and relevant. Amanda and her experts give us clear and practical skills that we can immediately apply to our work. Some of my favorites are their Edge of Life Suicide Prevention course, where Amanda shares her personal experiences, and their They Did What? law and ethics course that looks at real cases where therapists faced formal disciplinary actions. We are legally required to take continuing education to increase our competence, and most other courses out there don't actually teach the material in a way that we can learn it, but TDC does. Check out the links in the show notes. If you are looking for continuing education credits, make sure that you check out CHEP, CHEP. This organization provides high-quality CEUs, continuing education units, and as a bonus, all of the profits from their CE courses go directly to supporting homeless veterans. So not only are you getting your continuing education credits, you're also supporting out a great cause. Make sure to check out the link in the show notes to find out how you can get started with your continuing education credits today. The next area that I want to talk about is burnout's impact on your personal life. Because let's be real, you are a social worker second and you are a human first. So it is very important that we are looking at all of you as a human, not just all of you as a social worker, right? So burnout does seep into your personal life as well, and it can strain your relationships. It can make it to where you don't want to do the things that you once enjoyed doing, to where your hobbies are just now have disappeared and you don't know what fun is anymore. And also, it creates this loop that just kind of keeps you stuck in this spiral, and it can really, really impact your mental health, the way that you're functioning, the way that you're coping, the way that you take care of yourself or don't. So what this looked like for me is when I was feeling burnt out, I didn't know it, by the way. And a lot of times you don't see these signs coming up unless you're really paying attention, but I didn't even know what to look out for, really. So it just crept up on me. And when I had a chance to kind of look up and look around at my life, I realized it wasn't very good. It wasn't very balanced, because all of it was just going towards work. All of my energy, not all of my time, but like all of my energy was going out. And there was no way of replenishing this energy. And so what that looked like for me is I didn't have time to show up as a wife that I wanted to be. I didn't have the energy or the mental capacity to be the friend that I wanted to be. So when people would come to me looking for support, looking to hang out, looking to go have fun, I was in a place where I'm like, I love you, I just can't. And over time, people are going to get tired of hearing that. And over time, it's going to be insulting. Like, what do you mean you can't? Or why are you bailing again? And so it's really important to be able to be honest with yourself. Is this happening for you? Are you noticing a change in your relationships that you don't like? Is there room for improvement in your relationships? Right? So what I really had to do at this moment was take an inventory, and I started with my values. So I sat down and I wrote down all of my values and I ordered them, right? So this is part of what I learned from this experience, is that I really need to be focused on my values and make sure that my schedule reflects that. For example, I did have to have a job, right? So I had to have money. So that stayed, okay, 40 hours there. But my other values were health and family and friendships. And so I had to make sure that all of these areas were reflected in my schedule, that I was making time for these areas. It's not one of these things like, oh, well, when I have the time, when I find the time, I'll go to the gym. When I find the time, I'll go meet up with my friends. No, 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 no. This had to be a priority. I had to make sure that there was the time there before anything else. And if there were things that came into my life that were distracting me or taking my energy away from these top values, I said, no, I'm sorry, but I can't. I want to, but I can't right now. And that's part of the boundaries that I had to set with myself. That's part of the boundaries that I had to set with other people, with my work. right? And you, for yourself, you need to kind of feel that out. What are the boundaries that you can set? Because we don't want to get fired, but we also don't want you to end up in the hospital from an emotional mental health breakdown, right? So there has to be a balance. Also, the second lesson that I learned, in addition to having a value-led life, is ongoing self-care. And what does this look like for me? Because I didn't want a chore. I didn't want another to-do thing on my to-do list. It had to be fun. It had to be something that I was looking forward to, something that I know I wasn't going to cancel on myself. And so what does that look like for you? What are those things? And self-care here has to be the effective self-care. And I'm going to talk about this a lot in the workshop that I'm doing next month, is essentially how do we take care of ourselves? How do we have ongoing stress management that is fun, that's enjoyable, that we enjoy? And how do we prevent ourselves from getting burnt out or from landing in this trap again? What are the ways to do that? So, in addition to having good self-care practices, it's so, so important to have that social support. When I started reaching out to my colleagues, to my friends, when I was feeling down, when I was feeling frustrated, angry, irritable, 100%, maybe 99%, 99% of the time, I felt better after that phone call, after that conversation with somebody who got it, somebody who was able to be there. And at the same time, I was able to take the opportunity and say, hey, how have you been? What's been going on with you? And also being able to feed into other people when you're feeling like shit, it really helps you feel better, right? And finally, I learned that I really had to lean into my supervisor as a support. I had to be honest about what was going on. And when I did that, I was actually pleasantly surprised that my supervisor was like, okay, since you're feeling this way, let's take some of the cases off. What can we do? How can we make this a little bit manageable for you right now? And I don't know what your supervisor is like, but if you feel like you're able to be open and honest with them, there may be a way that they can work with you. Because if they are an expert in social work, they understand, and they've probably been there too. And they probably don't want you to quit. They want you to stay because chances are, if you're getting burnt out, you are a really hard worker. You are dedicated. You are passionate. You are learning. You are good at your job. So they don't want to lose you. Okay. So though this is kind of just a recap, a very short overview of my story of burnout, how it affected my life, the symptoms that you need to look out for in your own life, and the impact that it might be having on your professional and on your personal life, and just some tips around what worked for me as far as living by my values, kind of reprioritizing that, finding balance, making sure I prioritize self-care, making sure I'm reaching out to other people, bringing them in for support, and tapping into other people in the field who may also be able to support me through this process, such as a supervisor or colleague, even a therapist, right? If you want to learn more about this, if you want to dive deeper, then I encourage you to check out this virtual seminar that I am doing what's that word? in conjunction collaborating. There we go. In collaboration with CHEP. They are a gracious sponsor of this podcast. So the seminar is called Burnout and Prevention for Social Workers. Straightforward. You know what you're going to get, right? It's going to be on December 5th. It's going to be virtual. The link is there in the show notes. Make sure to check it out. It provides CEs for social workers in Virginia, but it is open to all social workers all over the world, all over the United States. So definitely check it out if you want to learn more about this subject. If this episode helped you in any way, if this reminded you of somebody that may need this information, go ahead, open your app, click the share button, text it to them, send it via IG, whatever it is that you do. Make sure that you are sharing this information, because the worst that's going to happen is they're going to be like, okay, thanks. And they don't listen. But the best that might happen is they might realize, oh shit, I'm really not doing very good. Like I can kind of see myself in Catherine's story, and I had no idea, because that's the story of so many social workers. Is I had no idea I was getting burnt out, because you just have tunnel vision and you're just trying to just go and make it through the day. So please share this out if this was helpful for you. And with that said, thank you so much for being here. We'll talk next week.